on the syllabus, it says something about looking over the presentation, talking about that. We should have time to do that by the end of everything else we're going to do today. But it struck me over the weekend, really two things. One, I'm still not sold on, not all of you, but enough of you really having a clear idea of what we're supposed to be doing in this paper. I'm not sold on that, and that is troubling at this stage because the paper is due next time, right? So secondly, in an effort to address that, I was kicking around different things we could do today, and I lit upon this. 2 weeks ago, actually the date's probably right here, isn't it? 4/4 is when it happened. What on earth was that? A week ago. A week ago, something popped off on Twitter, and I only heard about it. I do have a Twitter. I don't really use it. There's reasons. You don't care. But anyway, something happened on Twitter. I heard about it on the radio, which is a very old man thing to say. I heard about a thing on Twitter on the radio. And basically, this guy, he's a cornerback for the Buccaneers named Carlton Davis. Has anybody heard of him? You have? Okay, so you may know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, he went to Auburn.
Do what?
He went to Auburn.
He did do that as well. Fuck that guy. But anyway, I went to Alabama, so. Anyway, he's pretty good. He tweeted a thing that got some people upset. And I'm not, given the nature of it, I'm not going to read it. But I will show it to you because I feel like we have to start there so you have any idea of what we're talking about. The only thing I ask is you do not read the tweet aloud. Can you guys see that okay? Great, I assume so. Just so we're clear, well, I kind of have two questions here. Number one, I believe should be an answer in the affirmative for all of you, just giving context clues. Can everybody pick up on the offensive word in this tweet? You may not know necessarily why it's offensive, but again, I'll give you a hint. Miami is not the offensive word in this tweet. Right? Okay. My second question is, because it's this one, right? My second question is, does anybody not know why that word's offensive? It's okay not to know. You don't know. Okay. Anybody else? Cool. That kind of makes part of my point for me. I'm going to tell you what it means in a second. But I'm going to tell you the rest of the story of how I heard about this. And this brings me to why we're talking about it in this class. He tweeted this, a week ago on the 4th. Okay. The internet, as it does, took notice. He's a famous person. He plays on the Super Bowl championship team. He's not Tom Brady level famous, but very few football players are. But he's pretty famous, right? He's an up and coming. I think he's like 24, I believe. So he hasn't had much of a career yet, but his career's on the rise. People know who he is. People took notice of this before he deleted it, because obviously he deleted it. I hear about this on the radio. This is it's called an anti-Asian slur, which already I have a problem with that designation, because any slur is anti whatever it's talking about. A slur is insulting, so it's redundant, but that's beside the point. My point is, I'm listening to this on the radio, and they're talking about this kid. He's 24. You may not agree with this, but you guys are kids. That's just how it is. And he says this thing, and people get upset. And he comes back later, and you probably won't be able to see this as well, so I'll read it to you. He says, "I would never offend any group of people. You reporters can look for another story to blow up. The term was directed towards a producer claiming he ran Miami. With that being said, I'll retire that word from my vocabulary, given the hard times our Asian family are enduring." And then after that, he clarifies further, "I used a term that from where I come from has always meant lame, but I did not realize it has a much darker negative connotation. I have learned a valuable lesson and want to apologize to anyone that was offended by seeing that word, because we need to focus on helping each other during these tough times." So he issued an apology. Now all of that is in the story here on the radio, and then the guy goes, "But there's no excuse for using that word. That's what the guy on the radio says. And immediately, what strikes me is, but you just gave one. The guy just said he didn't know. That to me feels like an excuse. If you don't, how could you know if you didn't know, right? Like that makes sense to me. And again, here's what's interesting to me about all of this. When the guy said on the radio, there's no excuse for this behavior, there's no excuse for this kind of word. Already, I don't quite remember exactly how he put it because it's almost exactly the same every time. You know what I'm saying? Anytime something like this happens, when it gets reported on, or maybe even potentially when you hear about it, someone will say, but there's no excuse for blah, blah, blah. And it's like, is that fair? Number one, because again, that's what interests me, is like, is that fair? And of course, that we can't write about it in our paper. But number two, I do think it's a super common occurrence, it's a super common reaction. And that brings me to our paper. What does it say about us as a people, society, and culture? That's kind of our go-to. Do you know what I mean? He says, he claims, and look, he could be lying. That's possible. People do that. But he's 24. He's from South Beach. He's from Miami, apparently, okay? And from when and where he grew up, which, by the way, is not when and where I grew up, that word got tossed around. In a way, in a context that is completely devoid from its historical context. So like, again, I normally don't get on Twitter, but because I'm teaching this class, I went on for you guys, I did it. And I looked to see what people were saying. And one of the tweets I saw that really seemed to encapsulate most people's opinion was something to the effect of, this has been an Asian slur since at least the 60s. There's no way this guy couldn't have known. And I was like, that's not true. There's absolutely a way this guy couldn't have known. Again, I point to two things. One, he's 24. Two, you guys, on average, are around 18, 19 years old. You cannot fathom the amount of things you don't know. Because you haven't seen it yet. You're 18 or 19. It takes a while. And by the way, to fill you guys in on what this one dude is talking about, it's a slur from the Vietnam War for Vietnamese. Okay? From the 60s. How many things do you guys concretely know from the 60s? I bet it's very small. I bet it's super small. Here's the thing I didn't know, because I researched a little bit for this story. I looked up the term, and number one, there is an Urban Dictionary entry from like 2011 or something, where it talks about the use of the word the way that he was trying to use it. So it seems like that is actually a thing. But number two, apparently the slur actually comes from the 50s, from the Korean War. I didn't know that. I learned something that I didn't know. So here's my point. And again, I want you guys to be able to enter the conversation now, but I wanted to give you all this background. Again, what struck me about it wasn't just the fact, I guess I could turn this off now. How do we, this one? Sweet. It wasn't just the fact that he said it and it got the response that it did. That's a big part of it. But it was what the radio guy said when he was reporting on it. Because again, I think that tends to be the tenor of the conversation. There's no excuse. Immediately after the guy on the radio reported this guy's excuse, which to me was like, feels valid. Like, I agree, no one should say those kinds of words. But if you happen to say them, not knowing that it's a word you shouldn't say, right? Well then, now you know, you've apologized, it seems like we should move on, right? Like, that should kind of be it. So I kind of wonder, I want to ask you guys first, like, I'll start very generally. Does this seem to be, in your opinion, like how these types of things go? Like, does this remind you of anything, any experiences you might have had or any stories you might have heard sort of in this same vein? It's not a rhetorical question, like.
I mean, I feel like it is.
Okay.
Because I guess like the older generation, or some of the smart people in our generation, they think that we should know things that, I mean, we really shouldn't know much about the 60s because we don't get taught that in history.
Well, no, definitely, whatever you are taught, like in a history class, for instance, usually not going to get taught slurs.
Exactly.
You know, like it's kind of a, like I don't even know, like I knew it was a slur. I mean, I'm sure I saw it like in an old movie or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's something like that.
But people just say that to make, to hype up the situation. But when people stop and think they didn't know what it was, I didn't even know what it was until this happened.
Sure. Well, and that's kind of, let me try to, all right, let me dig out a marker. So one point is, one thing we're talking about is there's an expectation, and we might define this a bit better, but that you should know more. I'm curious, know more about what, know more in what way, but I would agree that there seems to be, because again, a big part of what we're talking about in this paper is what standards are we holding ourselves to, each other to. I think that's one of them, is people keep saying things like, he should have known. Should he? But again, that's not what we're talking about in the paper. What we're talking about is they feel like he should have. Okay, that says something about us, right? For sure. Okay. What about, and it ties into this, what about this idea that there's no excuse? Like, why do you guys, there's a couple ways to go with this, but why do you guys feel like that's where so many people come down on stories like this? Yeah, sure.
It's like they want to punish them, like they, there's no excuse for what you did, like we're not going to listen to anything else, we're just going to, you need to be punished, that type of thing.
I agree that could be part of it. Again, my question there would be, why? That could be one potential angle into an argument. Why do you think the impulse is immediately, because it's quick, right? That's part of it too. Like I think it's partially to do with this, but there's normally very few questions asked, right? He said a thing, we immediately leap to this, as opposed to, well, this kid's 24, he's from a part of the world I'm not from. Maybe there's something to that, right? Like maybe we ask him, maybe we talk to the guy, right? Like there's very little of that usually. Why? Why is this our go-to? What does it say about us that it is, right? What do you guys think? Because real talk, people are, even now, are calling this kid racist. They're and this won't happen because he's good, but like they're talking about they should like kick him off the team and shit like that. Has anybody heard of Myers Leonard, basketball player? Oh, this is great. You haven't heard of him because he's not that big a deal. But he did a similar thing like a month ago or whatever. He used a Jewish slur on a stream that he claims he didn't know was a slur, right? It's like kite, but you replace the T with a different letter. Anyway, he got traded, right? He had to go to a bunch of classes. He had to meet with like synagogue officials. He had to do like a whole thing. When again, if you believe him, and I'm inclined to because he's just an idiot kid. I was an idiot kid once. You just don't know things. But again, the go-to was he should have known, now he has to be punished. In Carlton Davis's case, he's a little bit better than Myers Leonard. He's probably going to stick around. He may not have to go to as many classes, but he may have to go to some. I think he's had the only lesson he needs, which is, yeah, don't say that word, bro. It means something else. Like, oh shit, I didn't know, right? Why do we do that? There's many possible reasons. Why do you guys think we're so given to, we use the word punishment. There's another way to talk about it is like public shaming, right? We immediately want to shame someone publicly. Why is that, do you think? Why do we do that as a people, a society, a culture?
I don't know, it's just like, I feel like a lot of people have like, this culture is like really harsh, but like you said, really all he had to, somebody just had to call him out, and that could have been the end of it, and he would never have to say that again.
Yeah.
But people just wanna like take it further and further.
Well, no, yeah, because the apology he gave, like, people reacted to that negatively. They said it wasn't good enough.
I mean, you'll hear your parents say apology is not good enough, but I don't think an apology will ever be like great enough for both sides. There's always going to be someone that agrees with the apology and then not agree.
Sure, sure. But again, like, it's, I mean, I guess part of what I'm getting at today is, so I got something in my eye, it's killing me. I think it's fuzz from my mask. Jesus Christ. Anyway, no, part of what I'm getting at is, it is the fact that, again, we have like enough people in our society that will never be sated by something like an apology. Because, again, in the apology he gives, to me, I feel like he addresses all the issues. He says he didn't know. He says he's going to retire that word from his vocabulary, right? He definitely didn't mean to hurt anyone, he says. And he even gives a little bit of backstory on like what he thought it meant, right? I feel like as much as you can in 2 tweets, like pretty well explains himself and says he's sorry, right? Like, but again, it's not good enough. Why? What would be good enough might be another question, right? Maybe we have an incomplete picture of our standard.
I mean, either way, if he believes where he did, which he did in this statement.
Yeah.
There's really, in the public eye, there is no real good way to say that that is good enough for them.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because either way, the public eye, they're always going to try to make something out of nothing.
Why do you think that is? I'll give you a second, because I'll explain why I'm doing that. Because on some level you could be like, why do you keep asking me? I agree, maybe, that part of what we're talking about is like the way we sensationalize stuff, right? Like stories like this, because we do.
Right.
Not just the media, we do it too, okay? We're part of that machine. But if we stopped there in our papers, that would be a little bit banal, right? Because we know that. We know we do that. So we have to ask why again. Well, why do we do that? There's all kinds of possible reasons. Yeah, what's up?
Well, like, I'm sure there's studies and stuff on it, which would be really interesting to read, but like every time I ever see a story like this, my brain immediately thinks like, man, they're just doing that for power, like, you know, like they want to feel like they're in charge of something, like they're getting on to someone else. Like, I'm sure at some point in your life, you've been in like a group, whether it's in high school and somebody tries to get on to you that has no authority over you. Like, I feel like that's the same situation.
So you're saying, I'm trying to make sure I understand you correctly. Like, I mean, power is an interesting term, but you're
false sense of power, I guess.
well. I mean, who's to say it's false? I mean, power is power, even if it's fleeting, which I think is what you're describing. But you're kind of saying one reason, one argument we could make on why our immediate move is punishment is that people almost seek to, and we've talked about other examples in these terms, but like by taking this guy down a peg or two, you feel like you've lifted yourself. Is that fair?
I mean, it's literally what people do. I mean,
Sure.
They teach you that, like, oh, bullies do this in the school all along, and they do. That's a psychological thing.
So now you're saying these people are bullies.
I mean, I don't want to say that. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't say the word.
I'm not judging you for it,
I
man.
mean, this is a 24-year-old, he still has like his whole life, and they just
Yeah.
want to throw him in the gutter. And like, it's like a big group, and it's
There is a piling on like thing that tends to happen. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like, really, when it comes down to it, would be like thousands of people really against one.
Yeah.
Other people agree with this dude, it'll be like they won't hear about it. They're just like beating him up and like trying to really just force him to retire and get in his head.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the only apology they're gonna accept is if he's retired, gets kicked off free agency or something like that. But
Yeah. Which again, another interesting aspect of this conversation is that that second part will probably never happen because he's young enough and good enough, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a slightly different paper, but it's like, how effective is this stuff? Well, maybe it depends on how famous you are and how well liked you are.
He just won a Super Bowl. It's nothing.
Yeah, like he's gonna be all right. But if he were like in his early 30s and he'd lost a step and like, you know, then a week from now you go, Bucks cut Carlton Davis, and you're like, oh shit. And it, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
but that's not part of this conversation right now. All right, one thing we could do, because I want to try to give you guys as many examples as I can today, is an although statement, right? And the way I talk about these, you start with although, and usually you start with a bit of a banal claim, because I'd say 80% of the time, 85% of the time, your first read of anything you're trying to make an argument about is going to be at least a little bit banal, because it's your first read. If it's your first read, there's a good chance it's going to be somebody else's. And that's kind of the beginning definition of a banal claim, okay? So it's going to feel like I'm calling you out. I'm not. What did you say a moment ago?
About how society always picks on something small to make it something big.
Good. Okay. So although, you know, this situation another example of like sensationalism or whatever, right? By setting it up as although, we're saying, look, this is true, but I have more to say, right? I'm not going to stop here. One idea would be that it's like, this is kind of what you're saying. One argument is that we seek to capitalize upon a public figure's mistakes, right? We seek to make ourselves feel better, feel more powerful, what have you. As a result, like, basically we're saying, well, I didn't do that. Look at that fucking idiot, right? I think we can make that case, potentially, right? Now, again, this is a thesis. We would need a roadmap beforehand. We would need to explain a little bit of why we're talking about power all of a sudden, but I think you could. That's one possible argument. There are others. What are some others? We can kick them around for a little bit. What else, why else do you think we immediately leap to this no excuse, punish this guy, potentially fire him type of thing?
We kind of discussed before there's a lot, like, I don't want to say laziness, but like a lot of people don't care to really hear opinions. They don't care to do research or hear any other sides. They really just want to pick something and go with it.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like the internet. They have like groups. Like if you agree with something, say if you agree with conspiracy, you can get in a group like that. And
Yeah.
People that hate on him can get in a group like that, and that's all. They're only going to hear bad things.
Well, we got to be a little more precise, because like I would say before this tweet, the level of membership in the Carlton Davis hate group was probably pretty small. You know what I'm saying? So like I don't know that we can necessarily like to hate this guy, but I do see some legitimacy to like, they're coming from somewhere. Like they're motivated by, again, perhaps something other than this, right? Why are they motivated to, the way we're talking about it, like immediately bury this guy, do you think? you guys are talking about groups, you're talking about, it seemed like you were kind of getting toward this idea of tribalism in the way that we talked about it a little bit. I have an idea where you guys are headed, but of course you guys have to get there. I can't do it for you. Why do you think so many people are so quick to bury a guy like this for something like this?
Because so many people don't have a thinking else.
What happened?
Because so many people do not have a thinking else.
What did he say?
Because so many people do not have the fame he has.
The fame he has. Yeah, I mean, again, that to me sounds like a little bit like this, like you might be skewing it slightly differently, but they sort of want something that he has a little bit, or they want to, again, I mean, the verb I kind of came to is like capitalize. They want to take advantage of the fact that he has something they don't, right, is what you're saying? That he has that thing, and they can use the fact that he made a mistake here to maybe get a little bit of it for themselves or what have you, right? For sure. When it comes to group stuff, like, real talk, what I'm kind of saying is you can start any of the theses we've come up with so far with this all those statement. I want another argument. You guys talking about groups. I'll put it to you this way. This is what you guys are driving toward. Who's the sort of person, do you think, to call a kid out for a tweet like this?
Person who offends you.
Person who what?
Who offends you.
A person who found it offensive? Is that what you said?
The person who offends you.
Who offends you?
Who's offended by what you said?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, for
I
sure.
feel like most of these people really weren't offended.
Well, I mean, we can't know that, you know. And even, I think kind of what you're getting at is like there's an actually being offended versus like there's got to be a better way to describe it, but it almost seems like you're getting at like a for show offended.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Recycle people.
I think, in other words, it's like people only are saying stuff to make a big picture because other people around them have already felt offended by it.
Yeah.
So to make their group bigger, or to make them more noticed, or for more attention or whatever, they have to say something about it in order to get their better results.
Well, and so people in that group kind of know where they stand in that group. Is that fair?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like I'm sure, like, the only reason I knew that word is because I watched MASH, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because there was that's the only reason I know that word, and then, like, I'm sure that a lot of people, the thousands of people that were in that argument, I'm sure a good percentage of them didn't even know what the word was until I saw it and looked it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So here's what we're dancing around. Because I want to, again, as much as we can today, skew all of this toward, well, what would we do with this in a paper? Another possible argument that we're kind of getting at. I'm going to build it the same exact way. We talked about tribalism. This is not finished, by the way. So this is just what you guys are talking around. Does anybody remember what tribalism is about in the way we use it today? Yeah.
Striving to belong to a group.
Yeah. So like, and you guys have seen this online, especially if you have like older relatives who might feel a certain kind of way politically, like one way or the other. You know, every time Aunt Lisa or whoever posts something before you even see the name attached to it, because it's like some damn meme with like whatever they're, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know immediately. Now, one idea is, well, that's really how that person feels. They just want everybody to know, which is fair. Okay. Another way that gets read, especially if you're talking about tribalism, is that can be a way to signal to other people who also agree with you in whatever sort of idea we're talking about, right? You're signaling to them, hey, I'm with you guys. Just want to make sure you know that, right? And I think what you guys are kind of talking about here is that could be going on here. Like, one potential reason why we're so quick to bury a guy for doing this sort of thing is we want to make sure everybody knows that we're not what? Huh?
Not belong.
Well, yeah, but again, like, the group we're in is not what?
Against them?
We're not the kind of people to use that kind of word. We're not what?
Racist?
Yeah. We're so hyper insecure, might be a good word for it, that like we want to make sure everybody knows, hey man, I'm not using that word, right? I think that's a valid potential argument. And that's a signal we send when we bury a guy like this. Oh, look at this dumb fucker, what he did. That's not me, I would never do that. How could he not know? There's no excuse, right? Like, that's where that you use that language. It's a bit hyperbolic. I think it's a bit unfair. But again, the question is not whether or not it's fair. The question is, why do we treat people like that? One argument is, how do we sum it up? I hate this, because even this phrase sucks these days, but I arrived at this unintentionally, this virtue signaling phrase, which is a real thing that's worth talking about, but it also gets tossed around by like white supremacists, so it's kind of, you can't use it anymore. It sucks. But still, the idea is one potential argument, one potential thing it says about us. We bury a kid like Carlton Davis, who did play for Auburn, so I'm given to hate him. We see him do this thing, and we, again, in a way, can take advantage of the situation and say, but I'm not that guy. I want to make sure everybody in my friend group, everybody who might see this, knows I'm not like that. I'm better than that, right? It's kind of the thing. For sure. All right. So why do we do all this? Well, as I said, I thought, number one, to be totally honest, it just makes too much sense for this class. And stories like this aggravate the shit out of me. They just do. To recap, kid's 24. Claims to not know. I'm inclined to believe him. He's 24. The amount of things I did not know at 24, mind-blowing. So sure. And he apologized, says he didn't know, says he will never use it again. That's about all I think anyone could reasonably ask for. Oh, so I was like, somebody's coming in. But then, of course, a lot of people react with, that's not enough. There's more we could ask for. And I'm like, how? So therein lies the interest. Therein lies, well, what does it say about us that we feel that way? Here's two potential arguments. There are others. Some of you look like you're fading, so I'll stop here. But I just wanted to illustrate for you. This is the kind of thinking, the kind of sort of investigation I want you to do into whatever you're writing about, okay? Again, what you cannot do, just to be sure, you cannot participate in the conversation. So if I were in your position and I were writing about Carlton Davis, my immediate impulse would be like, well, my first body paragraph is going to be about how shitty these people are to this guy. But that's not what we're doing, right? Because that ignores the fact that they're doing it. We're not arguing against or for anyone. Our argument kind of zooms out and looks at that stuff. Yes, sir?
It's like a neutral argument.
Well, I think part of the confusion is you guys think an argument has to mean heated.
One side or the other.
Huh?
I was thinking it was one side or the other.
Well, that is what an argument means, but even that, I think nowadays when you guys think of argument, you think of people fighting. That's not what argument is. That's a kind of argument, but classically speaking, an argument is just, here's evidence, I'm going to tell you what it means. Doesn't have to be heated, right? Does have to pick a side, but doesn't have to be, because again, these are arguments. You'd have to prove this. You know what I'm saying? Another way to think about it is, you could, if you wanted to, try to come up with a counter argument to speak against it. That means you have to prove your case, right? So for instance, we could probably come up to a counter argument to both of these because, let's be real, both of these are pretty cynical, right? Pretty dark, if that's like how we work these days. Can anybody think of a possible argument, a possible reason why we bury a guy like Carlton Davis that's less cynical, a little nicer, a little more optimistic? I can, but I'm kind of hoping you guys can. Why do we do that? Why are we so quick to step on a guy who, according to himself, inadvertently uses a racial slur? Why do we do that? What's like a possible good reason for that we do that?
Even if we don't agree that that's why they did it?
I think, yes.
Okay.
We're talking about possibilities.
I don't know. I'm sure there's people that say, oh, they were just trying to make sure we stomp out the hatred, you know?
Yeah. Look, the counter argument to any of this, what we're talking about, just for a moment, we're talking about argument like a sophist would. These are people that were run out of Athens thousands of years ago. But it's sort of the idea, and again, you could even start with this still. Seems like this is just being sensationalized for no reason. An optimistic argument would say something like, it's actually about empathy. And the fact that we're so, probably a better verb, but we're so worried counter argument. The reason you know these are arguments you have to speak to. Well, it's actually about empathy and the fact that we're so worried about others being offended. Not even necessarily us, right? This comes back to that question about that you guys kind of raised about, well, some people would really be offended by that word. And other people would be maybe offended for people, you know what I'm saying? We're so worried about others being offended that we react, perhaps too quickly at times, to squash offensive material. Right? What we're basically saying in that argument is we're agreeing that it may have been a little fast in this particular case, okay? But we're basically saying that it comes from a good place overall, right? That's a valid argument too. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, neither one of these has got a lot of heat behind it, you know what I'm saying? But they are arguments, because you have to prove them, you have to explain them, where your reasoning comes from. You know what I'm saying? Questions about any of that? Okay. As I said, this is the sort of thing you want to try to do in this paper. Okay? I wanted to give you one last really good, this is what we're doing. Okay? All right. Let's move on to something else. Okay, that's enough. So, your papers are due next time. What that means is, the only thing you have left in this class, major assignment-wise, is a final project. That tends to scare people, just that term, final project. Here's why I designed the class the way that I do. I may have told some of you this before, but I want to make sure. Normally, a way a class like this would go is you would get a final project roundabout now anyway. But your final paper would be the very last thing you would give me, okay? So when the semester ends, whenever that is, early May, you would give me that final paper, and that would be the end, okay? You'd be working on it right up until then. And alongside that, kind of in the background maybe, you'd be working on the final project, and then a week or two before that paper was due, you would give me that project, okay? I remember being a student. I was a student for 10 years, like a college student for 10 years. Very long time. And I remember the hell that finals can be, okay? It's just stressful, it just is. All of your classes are asking for final materials, whatever that might be, at the same time. It's kind of a lot. So what I decided to do a couple years ago was this. I get your final papers early. You give them to me next time. We've been working on it for like a month. Now, not all of you have been working on it for a month, if you catch my drift, but as a class, you've had a month. That, to me, is a lot of time for 3 pages. Like, I feel like, whether or not you feel rushed about it or stressed about it now, you had time before. Like, that's something you might think about in the off season, you know what I'm saying? But my point is, I ask this from you now. The final project, which will be the last thing you give to me, is important, but it's not way lower stakes, way less stressful, okay? It's meant to the best of my ability, let you breathe a little bit at the end of the semester, okay? You're gonna have other classes, you're gonna have finals in those classes, papers or tests or whatever. You got a lot of shit going on. I don't want you to just forget about this, but again, this is the sort of thing doesn't take quite as much intense thought, okay? So that's why I do this last rather than the paper. So what is it? I've gone around different ways to do the final project, and what I actually arrived at last spring semester, you know, when all this nonsense kicked off, was that you could just give it to me digitally. There's different ways to think about this. First of all, I'll address the very top. Group presentation. You can work in a group. You do not have to. I hope my reasons for saying you do not have to are obvious. But I will say that if you choose to work in a group, it can be fun, it can make things easier, sometimes it makes things harder. But it usually makes things a little easier. I would simply ask that you keep yourself safe with your group, you know what I'm saying? Again, I hope that's obvious. Anyway, what is the assignment? Let's start with the top like we always do. Due date, listed at the end of our course calendar. I don't remember, it's on the syllabus. I've made you a syllabus. Go look at it. It's the end of the semester though, when it's due. I'll come back with a hard date next time if you're really fretting about it, but it is on the syllabus. Length, 20-ish minutes, 25% of your grade. Now those are big. I understand those are big. Let's address the biggest one, 25% of your grade. Damn, right? Most people, at worst, do okay with this. And again, I'm going to give you time to work on it. I'm going to give you time to think about it, plan out what you want to do. To me, once you get the paper in, I'm kind of saying you could really shine up 25% of your grade. That's how I think about this last assignment, okay? Now, the 20-ish minutes, I also understand, is potentially terrifying because you guys don't understand how quickly 20 minutes can go. If you're talking, 20 minutes flies by. If you're sitting there, like in a class, staring at some idiot talk, 20 minutes crawls. Well, that's not what your project's going to be, so you're going to be fine. I say ish. You don't have to hit 20 minutes necessarily, okay? But let's say low bar, 15, okay? 15 to 20 minutes. And hey, it's an ish. You can go a little over 20, right? What I don't want are two things. One, cutting yourself off. Oh shit, we're at 21 minutes, just kill it. Like, don't do that, okay? And I also don't want anyone clearly padding. You get to 18, and I hear it a lot of just, so yeah, my mom told me this one story. You're like, I don't want that either. Okay, so what is the assignment? Essentially, it's a podcast. There's all kinds of ways to think about this, but the question I open with here, I want you to reflect upon your own social media use, how you've come to think about it at the end of the semester, and then I give you a bunch of questions, but basically, I'm of a mind that all of you use social media, probably to varying degrees, but at least compared to me, kind of a lot, okay? And I'm sure you've thought about it before, because we've had discussions in here. Some of them have been pretty decent. You guys seem to have some thoughts, which is cool. But I do wonder, now that we've had those discussions, now that we've expressed those thoughts and exchanged them, and, at the end of the semester, when you step back to think about what you do online, Facebook or Twitter or Twitch or anything, because social media is kind of pervasive at this point, right? It's kind of everywhere. What do you think about your interaction with that medium? I say use here. Interaction would be a better verb. Because it's not just like you're using it, you're on it, right? You're representing yourself. People are representing themselves to you. What are your thoughts on any of that? Have they changed at all? Do you think, at least right now, you might approach things slightly differently? Any questions like that, right? Like that's the kind of thing I want you thinking about for this assignment. And again, you can do it. Yeah, you got questions?
So like,
Yeah.
if we talk about those questions and like add depth to it when we answer,
You guys are so worried about late.
I mean,
It's just funny.
yeah.
It's just funny because
I mean, probably it's gonna be.
in essence, sure. I would still recommend, and we're going to talk about this more next time probably, but I've taught this before. What seems to go best for me, or in my experience, like looking at work that you guys have turned in, and I say some of this in here, is what you don't want is to simply have a list of questions, like by yourself or with a group member, and just hit them one by one, and like that be it. Because to me, the better ones like this, again, when I say it's essentially a podcast, it is. I don't know if you guys listen to many podcasts. The better ones tend to maybe have some questions written down, because you don't want just like, so what do you think? You know, but those are starters, right? And you don't have to just, all right, answer question, all right, number 2, right? If you get too locked in, I think, it gets very robotic, and it actually stifles your answers, stifles your thoughts, and that's where your money is made on this, right? When it comes to your grade. So if you can find a middle ground, like I'm not saying go in completely unprepared. I'm not saying don't have some questions, don't have some ideas written down. Absolutely. But also keep in mind, I think what would work best is maybe start with one, just to get things going. Start with a question, but then just see where it goes. Some of you, I guarantee, will probably over-prepare. Have a page of notes and questions and whatever else, and then you ask a question or two, like again, either to yourself or to a partner, and then you look up and 19 minutes have gone by. You're like, oh, but we didn't get to any of the, okay, oh, fuck, okay, I guess we're good. Guess we're good. Because you just had a conversation, right? Usually that tends to be better. And that's all I'm saying is absolutely prepare, but don't go into it thinking we got to hit all these points, we got to, because that's not really what this is. It's meant to be a little more organic, hopefully. The other thing I would say, you didn't ask this question, but it kind of brings it up. I would also point out that this is recorded. So if you do it one time, go back and listen to it. See how it sounds. Number one, I've had people turn things in, their mics were off. Bro, listen to it. Just listen to it for 10 seconds. Just see. You know? See if it works. But number two, you can listen to it and you may think, oh, that's pretty good. That really seems to address some of the questions in the prompt, or it really seems to tie into some of the discussions we've had in class. I think that does a good job. We're done, right? Or you listen to it and you realize halfway through your partner started talking about this one time their dad didn't pick them up after soccer practice and they were sad, and like it got derailed. Maybe you try again. You know, maybe you take a take two. No harm in that, because again, it's recorded. You got as many shots as you want, really. I just want to put that out there. Yes, sir.
So is it filmed as well?
It can be. That brings me to a technical question. So when you turn these in, and it says, does it say it down here? Oh, it doesn't. Wait, no, okay, that's just the rubric. Okay. There's two ways to turn this in. All of them are electronic. But one way is just to submit audio. And this can be trickier than you think. For some reason, it's not as easy these days to record audio as it is video. I don't know why. Audio is much smaller file size. It's just easier. But if you've ever tried to record anything, for instance, just audio on your phone usually doesn't like to share that audio with anything else. So that'll be a neat thing you'd have to mess with. I will say, if you have a laptop with a decent microphone, or even an external microphone is preferable, there are free programs like Audacity you can mess around with for a minute. The point is, one thing you could do is just turn in audio. That's an option. Most of you will turn in video because, that's what I'm doing right now, right? Your phone will do that crazy easy. The world is like set up for you to upload videos. That's an option too. And we'll have a technical conversation maybe next time about what that means. But basically, if you end up recording a video, what you got to know now is CourseDen will not just take videos, because CourseDen sucks. What you have to do, record your video, maybe watch it first, then upload it to YouTube. Then you give me the link to that video, then I can watch it. And there's ways to make your stuff private if you don't want anything out there. Like there's ways that I can see it where other people can't. We'll talk about that next time. But those are the two options when it comes. Like if you find a way to just record audio and it sounds good and it's in a good file format, like an MP3 or something, you can upload that to CourseDen. CourseDen will take that. But if it's video, most of the time CourseDen will not take it, and you have to do the YouTube route. Other questions at this stage? We ran through a lot today. It was my hope we would be able to accomplish that and allow you guys to get out a little early. I believe we have. I just want to ask one more time, because again, this is what we're really focused on. I wanted to introduce the project today, but I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that your papers are what matter right now, okay? They're due next time. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay. If you realize you have questions, I do have an email address. I don't think most of you know that. I do have one. Also, all of our videos from class are on YouTube. I do upload them to CourseDen. If you wake up tomorrow morning and you're like, oh shit, I feel like I had a really good idea of what the paper was supposed to be and now I don't, just go watch the first 20 or 30 minutes of this thing, because it'll be up by then, because you guys wake up late. We talk about it, okay? Also, I would say Grace is always here. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
She teaches SI. I also don't know if you guys know much about that. It's a thing. It helps people. Just putting it out there. When's the next SI meeting, Chris?
Today 1 to 2.
Today 1 to 2
In Pafford.
in Pafford.
107.
Pafford. Do you remember the room?
107.
107. So it's on the first floor. Walk around the first floor of Pafford. You'll see her. And you also do online Thursdays?
Yes, 9:30 to 10:30.
9:30 to 10:30. I know that's harder for you guys, but hey, you got here today. I believe you can get out of bed by then on Thursday. So there's that. There's also the Writing Center. They help folks. All right, that's all I got. Thank you guys.